My next guest in the program, Phil Coorey from the Australian Financial Review, the political editor nonetheless. PM come back to give his speech, so you've come back to hold him to account. We've got a bit of an insight what he's going to say. He says he's going to focus, it seems like, a lot on the sort of practical measures and things for next summer for the bushfires. Normally you sketch out your whole year, maybe we'll get some of this, but there's obviously pressure on an immediate fire response.
Yeah, and it sounds like he's just sort of wrapping all the things together that he's sort of done and suggested so far that he wants to do. And I guess the main one is to remove once and for all that sort of grey zone between state federal responsibilities when it comes to responding. And we saw him sit there for a couple of weeks and say, I can't do anything until I'm asked. And then in terms of calling out the army and so forth, and then in the end he said, I'm just going to do it anyway. So he just wants to sort of, I guess, remove those barriers to indecision that were part of, for which he was criticised, handling of this crisis. And but I guess missing so far, Tom, we've got to wait till we see the whole speech, because there was just an extract that they put out last night, just a part of it. But it's talking about adapting and being more resilient, but there's nothing there about mitigation in terms of doing more about climate change either. Mounting a stronger global effort or doing more domestically. And I think if there's going to be a criticism today, that will probably be where it'll come from.
So, I suppose he'll frame it, he'll be asked these questions and he'll say what we can do for the next bushfire season, which will begin in, well, I guess depending on where you are.
It's still going. It's actually still going, and it'll probably just roll straight into the next one the way it's burning out there.
But yes, it's still going, but we can't do anything about hazard reduction now for this one. So, I mean, he's right to say here are the measures we can do for the next one if we treat that in isolation. I guess when you talk about something like these call-out powers, you do invite as to whether or not, you get back to this tit for tat. Did New South Wales not ask for it? Should they have? Were they, and you get back into a potential blame game. Do the states
Well, the PM says he's not going to get into that today, but I mean, go back one step further. There were people trying to warn this government last year, the former firefighters, that they need to have all this in place this summer. That it was going to be a horrific season. You needed more firefighters, no more fire planes. You needed the army on standby.
Aircraft's a big one, and not a big cost on the federal budget to have had
exactly.
planes.
So it is, as good as everything is that he's going to say today, it does still sort of smell of catch up, in terms of, well, we were told this. So at least, the lesson has been heeded, I guess, to that extent.
And on the climate aspect. Well, I think we're expecting something this year. I mean, the government needs to flesh out anyway the technology aspect of getting to Paris, but perhaps that becomes a separate announcement, and they're still working on how it's framed, what can get a support within the party, what would actually have a big enough impact in the electorate.
I mean, well, that's the technological roadmap already flagged. I mean, another thing, if you really wanted to, sort of step up, you could, bring back the National Energy Guarantee. I mean, that was never going to be an onerous ask on energy companies anyhow, but that would be an important gesture. But I think probably but we have this sort of thing where Australia can't make much difference in it alone, and it can't. But I think the Prime Minister needs to show that he's worried about it and he gets it. I mean, and that could extend to mounting a stronger diplomatic effort instead of going to these overseas forums and arguing we don't have to do much and we can do Kyoto. Actually go in and ask the other countries to step up rather than leaving it to the Pacific Islands. Say, look, mate, our country's burning, we've got problems, we've got floods and fires and God knows what. We need the big polluters to do more. We go overseas all the time and tell the rest of the world, not to resort to protectionism on trade and do all these other things, and to be better on cyber security and fight terrorism. But we don't go over there and tell them what to do on climate change. And I think, the Prime Minister could send a message that he's going into bat for his country by, stepping it up on the global stage. They're the sorts of, it may not make a difference, but at least he's trying. And
it's interesting because there's talk of whether or not Angus Taylor and the government have sold their message well enough.
Clearly not.
That's the question. Is it the message or is it the substance? Because since then we've had people come out and criticise New Zealand and say, well, look, they don't do much, and their record on the face of it doesn't look very good. But is that really the point? I mean, it's a comparison to here's a country that's worse than us that's getting away with it, or is it a case of we'll call them out while we,
Yeah, look, it's a bit of both. I mean, the problem for the coalition is they've spent the last 10 years blocking policy on this, and they have the deniers in their ranks. So, Craig Kelly's still out and about there saying no such thing. It's not causing the fires, and there is a significant rump in their ranks doing that, and in their support base. So that ties the PM's hands politically. So that whole imagery and that spectre is what it has created this whole concept that they either don't believe in it or they're not doing enough, whether they are or they aren't.
We're still waiting on the fate of Bridget McKenzie, but there's been a wealth of stories since fleshing out every aspect of it. We've got the details on the projects that did miss out via an exclusive report. We've got also a whistleblower talking about the sort of process, the warnings given, and even the cover-up of dishing out money apparently to Labor seats at the last minute to make it look better. It just seems unfathomable that she'd survive.
I can't see it. I mean, from what you pick up, you know, there's certainly the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party wants her gone. A section of the Nationals want her gone. There will be blowback if she goes. But under this sort of everyone wins scenario, which has been canvassed in the Nationals, I mean, Bridget McKenzie's got 3 pretty important jobs: Deputy Leader, Cabinet Minister and Senate Leader. They will go to 3 separate people if she goes. So that will certainly, you know, soften the internal blowback, one would assume. Plus, you know, someone will get promoted from the backbench to go into the junior minister if Darren Chester goes into the cabinet. So there's 4 people who benefit from her ouster. So the only one who'd be left isolated would be Barnaby Joyce, and I think the Nats are resigned to leaving him isolated anyway. So, you know.
So does that make it a bit easier for Michael McCormack?
Well, it should.
He's handing out prizes.
Well, it should, but I mean, he's obviously still worried about how it blows back on him, and now they've got themselves in this position where they're not going to do anything until Phil Gaetjens reports. But it's just blindingly obvious that the public wants a scalp on this, Tom, and that stuff the ABC had yesterday about showing these, you know, pony clubs and stuff, which were, you know, put at the top of the list for a grant and got nothing because they weren't in the right electorate. It just feeds that perception this place is full of crooks, you know, and they're all corrupt, you know, and it's causing not just the government harm but politics harm. And, you know, I think a boil is going to have to be lanced, and, you know, it should have been done already, and it'll be done quickly, if not, you know, soon.
Phil Coorey, thank you.
Welcome, mate.